The biggest savings over the next year will come from MLR.
Abilities of AI at scale, and fusing that sort of getting started bolus or generation with the human touch of your agency.
Personalization has been a promise I've heard again and again everywhere, but it's not yet there. Is it AI's fault? Probably not. But it's, for me, the big, let's say, fail I have seen so far. It will come, for sure.
Towards AI, how employees should be using it. What are the principles of responsible use for AI? Committees representing different functions and departments in the interests of those different teams, sitting around the table together to decide how to prioritize the needs to try it out with first.
Strategy is what you need to glue everything together. It's what you need to inspire people, to get people working towards the same direction, to get all the projects prioritized in the right way. And if you don't have that, you're just going to have a lot of people doing different things. And we had, but that we use quite often, is the summarization of videos. Right now, there are a lot of videos, webinars, whatever, and they sit idle on websites, and nobody looks at them because they last 40 minutes.
We will get started in a little bit. For those newcomers, why don't you just tell us where you're joining from in the world while we're waiting for everybody to join? That is interesting, actually. In connection with marketing, I've been having a fun exercise where you see influencers that are being very supported by the industry. When you go and look at their actual physical effort, it's very low. So it's interesting to see, this discrepancy between, the athletes and their support and the influencers and their support.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. We have a good representation. Hopefully we'll have even more in just a little bit.
You guys need a little image of the world map here. We'll get a few countries.
Yeah. Hey, Chiara. Very nice. Nice to have you with us today. And guys, when we get started, feel free to also, shoot in your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to send them on to David and Henry as we get started on our discussion. It's like we have a strong female representation. I like that. That's cool. Especially this month being the Women's Month. So nice of you guys to join us today.
We will in Valloni. That's an awesome name. I have a few examples to discuss about Indu. Thank you. Few examples to discuss with you guys. I'm not going to endorse any specific company names, but I'll talk about the applications we're using things for. There's actually quite a few. So there's a good immediate answer to a couple of that area.
Sounds cool, Henry. And yeah, we are really focusing today on getting some concrete examples and discussing the usage. So we really aim to not just stay theoretical, but also share some knowledge. And that's really one of the main purposes for us. So having these webinars is to exchange and share knowledge. So thank you for being with us, Henry, today. And also you, David, of course, because you also have lots of knowledge to share just from a different perspective. So I'm excited to get our discussion going. So just wait a few more minutes. I know we opened up the room early, so we'll just give people a slight chance to join here, those who are more on time, not being early as we were, and then we'll get started. thank you all for joining us. If you just joined, why don't you tell us where you are joining from in the world? We've already have, I think, 6 countries so far. So it's really cool to see where you guys are joining from.
5 countries, three continents so far.
Nice. Yeah, that's the cool thing with hosting the time in this, midday, because that gives, most, or at least some good broader reach from across the different parts of the world.
Kind of makes New Jersey feel pretty boring, to be honest, guys.
The world is getting smaller and smaller, as always, both mentally and physically, right? Cool. So why don't I get started with the introductions, and that will give people a chance to join as we're getting through that and not miss any of the discussion. So first of all, officially welcome to everybody who's joined us today. My name is Lena. I'll be the moderator today. I have about 25 years, I'm going to sound old, of experience in digital marketing in the pharmaceutical industry. I like to call myself a modern Viking because, I'm from Denmark. I lived in both Switzerland, Brazil, and now I'm in Portugal. Let me introduce our speakers today. So with us first, we have Henry Anderson. Henry is a digital marketing leader with nearly 2 decades of experience in commercial innovation across social, digital, mobile channels. Henry specializes in brand storytelling, CRM, marketing automation, and digital compliance. He has been helping organizations for a long time. We've known each other for quite some years now to connect strategy to execution in an evolving digital landscape. So, Henry, thank you so much for being with us today. On the other side, we have David Doeg. David has spent years in successful high-tech startups, gaining experience across cutting-edge digital industries before founding Pharma Digital Solutions. He's now focused on healthcare, and David, he helps Pharma brands navigate omnichannel strategy and AI-driven marketing with actionable data-driven insights. And I know David loves data, like myself. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Lena, for hosting. This is awesome to see you. And yes, our friendship goes back quite a while, and we keep crossing paths in this digital community of the industry. So I'm glad to be here.
Good to have you with us. Oh,
do we lose David?
David's, I think, dropped out for a bit. Hopefully he will come back. There he is.
Hey, my somehow bugs. Also happy to be there and to share some of the experiences we had. I'm lucky as a consultant to be able to see what are the best practices in various companies and not being limited to one. So I'll try to share some of the best practices I've seen over the last years.
Great. So guys, with no further ado, let's kick it off with my first question. So we hear a lot about AI transforming everything, but what's that one area for you guys where AI is not delivering quite as promised?
So I'll go first. I think we're living in a world that's pretty lean and uncertain right now, right? And so the idea that AI it offers a ton of promise for industries and companies. But the challenge isn't so much a technological one. It's really around the mandates from leadership and driving the cultural and structural changes that companies need to embrace in order to take advantage of the platform and the technology. AI will change the way companies work. It's changing the way we live. And organizations kind of get into the rhythm of how they work. And change management is a big thing. But expecting results from AI without doing the work on the culture and the structure and issuing the mandate isn't a great way to start. So I do think that, one of the things in the way of progress is addressing sort of leadership's commitment to take advantage of the potential and to really make some bold promises or commitments for people's objectives.
What's your take on this question, David?
So I'd agree on the high level with Henry, but to have a precise answer on a specific example, I would say personalization. A lot of people are speaking about AI as the solution to personalization, one-to-one emails and all that. And right now we're far from being there. It's not a question of AI failing, actually. It's, again, as Henry said, a question of the company processes and the leadership and everything not being ready for it. But we have now people who think, oh yeah, well, thanks to AI, I'm going to be able to do one-to-one emails, but they are not yet able to validate content. They're not yet able to gather enough data about the physicians in a way that they can reuse it. They're not able to actually use the right tools to do all that. So personalization has been a promise I've heard again and again everywhere, but it's not yet there. Is it AI's fault? Probably not. But it's, for me, the big, let's say, fail I have seen so far. It will come, for sure.
Yeah. Great. So moving on, if you should share like a real world example. No, hang on. So I want to ask another question before we go into this. So is there a risk that pharma companies are jumping on this AI bandwagon without a clear strategy? And what mistakes do you see sort of happening? And have you made any yourself in your implementation? I guess that part perhaps goes mostly to you, Henry, but maybe also with you, David. Have you seen any, companies or clients make some learnings in this area that you could share with our listeners today?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think, sadly, I'm old enough to see prior technologies being introduced to the industry, right? So for me, there's a lot of parallels with when social media first came along and how the industry kind of dealt with the idea of consumers, patients, physicians wanting to connect with organizations and have a conversation with an organization. It kind of appeared everywhere on the landscape very quickly and raced ahead of companies' sort of infrastructure and knowledge. And over time, what we saw was there were great applications of social media for healthcare marketing, and we saw some bad scenarios of things getting out of control or introducing too much risk. And so, there's a lot of parallels there. But one thing social media did was really create this push as a marketing kind of culture towards authenticity and connection, right? So there was a theme in our industry for a while about just being authentic. AI has even, I hesitate saying this, but it's a broader set of applications for companies and consumers over time. It really is even a bigger game changer than the introduction of social. But it's also got this potential to deliver the polar opposite of authentic and connected, right? As an industry, we don't really want to be in the business of generating synthetic patient profiles. And like, here is somebody we made up with a computer algorithm that's living a patient journey or a healthcare experience, right? So the balance of using the processing and the creative potential of AI has to be met with the sort of the emotional and personal realities of a healthcare journey that somebody's living, and the empathy of that. So to the strategy question, absolutely, I think strategies tend to emerge, but AI is also still a channel, right? So I think there are some preconditions organizations need in order to start moving beyond the sort of tinkering and kind of mad science of trying it out. And I think things like a policy towards AI, how employees should be using it, what are the principles of responsible use for AI, committees representing different functions and departments in the interests of those different teams, sitting around the table together to decide how to prioritize the needs to try it out with first. But you've also got to balance the appetite to do something with the vulnerabilities of AI itself, right? There's a lot of offerings in the marketplace. There's a lot of entrepreneurialism going on, and we want to be in the business of creating value, not training an algorithm that someone's going to sell out and use with our competition, right? Or expose proprietary intellectual property. And so we really have to, consider both sides, the benefit and the risks. And a strategy will help with that. But I think the department needs are so different if you go around an organization, really prioritizing a business and building a strategy around a business problem to then harness AI is probably a good way to go about it.
Do you feel some of the stuff that you have learned with social media has prepared you for, working with this and sort of starting the quote unquote right way, or in a better way at least?
Yeah, I think it's, not by design. It's just with the introduction of the iPad, for instance, I've seen that. And when apps came along in pharma, and then social media came after that. Now we're dealing with AI. Telemedicine is another channel that's really come on the landscape here in the US. There's a set of kind of a lens and a way to look at the introduction of these technologies as you go through your career. And so there are some commonalities. And so, yeah, I do think it's the human factor, actually, right? The technology is really cool and sexy stuff, but you've got to deal with people to make that work. And so the more you go through your careers and the responsibilities that you have at work, the more you understand how to work with people to get the best out of the technology and build a high-performing team to take advantage of that technology. And that's a really important factor. Is it still requires people to get the job done, and people need knowledge, and people need to get over their fear of things. And not everybody is gifted at playing around with new technology, so you have to do a lot of hand holding, and I think at the end of the day, that's the one takeaway I would say is it's really working across and around teams to get the best out of the technology.
Dave, what's your take on all this? And do you have any questions for Henry on this, or even an opposite opinion?
No, on these general questions, I think we're super aligned, because that's what experience shows. If you don't have the people on board, you don't get anywhere. So to answer your question in a short way, so that we can get to the examples that people are waiting for, I'd say the strategy is what you need to glue everything together. It's what you need to inspire people, to get people working towards the same direction, to get all the projects prioritized in the right way. And if you don't have that, you're just going to have a lot of people doing different things and moving around without focus. So that's the main risk if you don't have a strategy, I would say. But just like Henry said, we have the same risk with social media. We had it with websites. I think it's even bigger now because AI can have deeper impact. But it's strategy gives a vision, or should at least.
Thank you.
So where are we going? Where are we going with this? At the end of the day.
That's a good point. Great. So with that, no further ado, let's get to those real examples. So I wanted to have you guys try and share, real world examples where you feel, or you've demonstrated even, that AI has really improved your marketing, not just in theory, but also with results, right? It's really created some measurable results for your organization, or in your case, David, for clients.
Should I start?
You go first, David.
Go ahead.
We've used with a few customers a lot of AI for content creation, everything around content creation, or what I call content modularization. So basically, how to take one content piece and turning it into different pieces, and that could be different formats, like turning a web page into an email, into a banner, and so on, or turning into different geographies, or turning it into different segments, adapting an email for persona and all that. So real example we've used are, for example, the localization of web page, where basically we can take a web page in English, and we were able to actually translate this web page within a few hours into the 4 main other languages that the customer was looking for, and not only translate it, but localize it, meaning adapting the tone, adapting the style. Some countries were a bit more formal, some were less formal. Some had wanted to put the patient needs first, understanding what's the issue that we are solving, and all these different also legal limitations that a country has or the other. That was all done within a few hours. I say hours, it actually takes a few minutes to be generated, but then you have a human editing it, reviewing it, and all that. That's why I'm saying hours. But for something that in the past would have taken easily weeks, plus quite a lot of time of review, approval, and all that. So that's one cool example we had, and that allows actually all these global strategies that go local to go much faster. And then you learn faster, you improve faster, and so on. Another simple use case we had, but that we use quite often, is the summarization of videos. Right now, there are a lot of videos, webinars, whatever, and they sit idle on websites, and nobody looks at them because they last 40 minutes.
Yeah.
The idea to be able to reuse them quickly in an email, even on the landing page itself, having the summary, is something that's very useful. And we've used tools to simply ingest the webinar and getting the summary in different formats. And can be webinar, but it can also be KOL videos and so on. And in a click, you get a summary that's adapted for an email. In another click, you get a longer form summary for those who want to have more details. In another click, then you get a short summary preview for people who want to view the video, and so on and so forth. And the fun thing on this one is we've actually tested it with a few customers who had the summary made by an agency, and every single time they preferred the AI version than the agency. We'll discuss later about what are the limitations of AI, and I still see a big place for agencies, for creativity and all that. But it's interesting to see that in some use cases, it's not only about automation or speed, it's also about the quality of the output, which may be different. And,
do you feel there's a certain sort of, I would say, resistant or not just total confidence in AI yet? Do people still go like, I prefer the agency because it's real people, or is it more because they're not familiar with it?
Now, obviously, you always have doubts, as you should with anything that's new. You need to check it. And the simplest the creative or the summary or whatever, the easier it is to trust it. And then you just gain trust over time. The first time you use AI for summary, you'll review every single word, and in any case, you'll always review every single word. But I mean, you're going to be much more doubtful about the output. And over time, you're going to gain trust. And maybe you're going to give it more complex projects, more complex tasks, and you'll see how it performs. And it's just like with people, you gain trust over time. I've got a few other examples I may go over in a while, but just to have some other voices, maybe I'll hand over to Henry so they can also give a few examples. And
yeah, sure. So there's a lot going on, and I think that's the one thing to stress here is that if you think people are just dabbling or AI is just touching or starting to touch marketing, I think you'd be mistaken. I think it is fully entrenched in a lot of areas of marketing and commercial activities. And I'll go through a few buckets of things, right? So if we just look at media to start, right? Media has been using AI for quite a while. If you look in Meta and you put a campaign together in Facebook, lookalike targeting is basically modeling an audience that looks like your target audience, right? So if you have a population you're interested in, lookalike targeting goes and finds a similar style audience for you to extend your reach. If you drop assets into the campaign and say you have 5 or 6 carousel ads, Meta will determine within about 100 clicks which is the most high performing ad within that basket based on the engagement and response of those units. So it auto optimizes for you within the display and use of inventory. On the programmatic side, the bid adjudication that a lot of DSPs use is very much driven by algorithmic, business rules, and the contextual placement. Every time you load a web page, there's an auction and a calculation made about what unit to place in the available ad spaces on those pages. And so it knows browser behavior, it knows what's written on those pages, and it is adjudicating that in split second, calculations. In search, one of the drastic improvements you can do in your search campaign is switching to value-based bidding. Value-based bidding basically optimizes your keyword strategy for where you're likely to get the best transaction and best use of the pay-per-click model. And you see drastic improvement when you switch to that from a manually configured program. Omnichannel is a hot one. So, there's a difference between multi-channel and omnichannel. Multi-channel being you buy a channel, you deliver in a channel. Omnichannel is the coordination between those channels. And there are now companies that automatically calibrate how much media, how much inventory and reach frequency do you put between EHR, between display, social, or emails. They're now starting to stitch together in real time the exposure that's needed to drive behavior for different segments. And so that is a step forward for efficiency and impact, because these systems now, it's now a system. And of course, all of these things are measurable, right? The beauty of working in digital is things are very measurable for us. And so when we start to implement some of these activities and take advantage of the algorithms, we can actually see deviations from our benchmarks and the historicals of some of the KPIs that we track. When it comes to planning, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask a quick kind of question to some of the things you've been saying is, do you think a lot of people don't really connect what you've been saying, especially around Meta and the ad optimization with AI? Because I think in many, it's sort of my perspective is I think we've been living with AI for a long time, right? But I think the sort of label on it and if we look broadly, right, I think a lot of people haven't really connected that that's been AI doing that job all along.
Yeah, it's kind of left the platform, so to speak, right? Because, the engineers at Google and Meta, they've been designing these things, but it's kind of been in the black box of the platform. And what's happened now is these tools have been consumerized, and there are far more mundane applications, if you will, that lay people can do. The aha is showing them that actually it's been done a while back, right? But if you're a review team or a legal, regulatory, medical team, you're generally looking at the asset, whether it's the ad or the email. It's the business side and the operational side that looks at the targeting configuration, right? Yeah. And using that. So we don't generally get into discussions with review teams about, the target configuration and whether you're doing audience extensions with lookalikes. They want to see the asset in black and white, and not the under the hood behind the scenes engineering. So applications for AI abound in the planning and strategy side of things. David had touched on things in content creation. Absolutely agree. I think AI is fantastic for content creation, campaign ideation, even thought starters to run a brainstorm. It gets you 80 or 90% of the way there to like some really well-rounded, ideas around concepts. Even then transferring your business problems into an agency brief. You could prompt a very succinct or very kind of well-rounded agency brief to give instructions to your partners with the kind of challenges from your strategy you'd like to see tackled. Social media listening has gone full AI now, where you used to go and scrape comments and mentions from different environments to try and, get the heat map or like sentiment analysis and volumes. And now they can index the conversation, and they can tell you where it's over indexing on certain issues or under indexing. And you can build a pretty big language model with some social media tools that are now using AI on top of them to drive analysis and identify opportunities for your business. Obviously, the content side, AI really can generate a ton of content, but we're not so much into let's buy 5 AI ads. It's more about AI is dissecting the construction of ads in new ways, and you can now build ads that are kind of layered. So you can have a background layer depending on what part of the country you're living in. You can have a bunch of different calls to action to mix in. You can have different people, so you have a diversity of all of your target audiences and represent your population. And then these algorithms are combining all the permutations of those units and marrying that to media delivery. So you are getting not 1 or 2 ad sets approved with the review team, but hundreds, if not thousands, of ad permutations that you can have as a basket. And then what you're doing as a brand team is adding additional individual layered elements and other people, new faces, new patient. Let's put that patient in our ad system for a new face, and then that goes to market and can be served across social and programmatic landscapes. And that is being driven by, an AI system as well.
If I may, on the topic of banners, so there is this layer model where you can have variation of the same banner, but there are also the simpler things that allow you to even create different format of banners. As of today, yes. If I have a square banner and I want it rectangle, I go back to my agency. I'm going to wait a good week if I'm lucky, and I'm going to pay a good €1,000 if I'm lucky again. And then I want to have it in 10 different formats, which is kind of standard now if you want to do programmatic banners. And that's going to be a significant budget and quite a lot of time. While with AI, you can actually do a click and have that. And then you multiply that by the variations that you spoke about with different pictures, different messaging, and you're suddenly able to actually have a huge pool of banners that then are being optimized by AI, because maybe the square banner works better with the woman and the rectangle one works better with the man in this area of the country and so on. So you start getting exponentially results from having visual variations, format variations, and targeting optimization. And this is not future in 3 years. This is real use cases that exist right now and that we're working on as well.
100%. Yeah. And I fully agree with what David's saying. And I think there's applications that can take a social media post and turn it into an ad. And then you basically have a process that you put your content through to kind of turn it into an ad unit.
Guys, I want to just jump in here. Sorry for interrupting, but there's a really cool question from Stefan. So he says, interesting aspect on the effectiveness of different channels in an omnichannel approach. Can AI not only improve the distribution of different channels, but as well finding the best sequence and follow-up of channels in a campaign, even in combination with live sales calls? What's the most effective? What's your opinion on that?
Awesome question. And yes, that's an opportunity area. And that is something a lot of companies are actively doing. So, the layer that makes omnichannel really interesting is the business rules layer, right? So you've got to start to really understand the data that you're generating when you're activating an omnichannel campaign. And you need to see the broad landscape and what is the end customer experience where a business rule is needed to connect. I opened an email over here. You know what that triggers? That triggers a notification to the field force member covering that territory in order to knock on that door within a window of time to say, hey, I'm following up on the subject that you were engaged with in your inbox, and I'm here to bring a conversation face to face with you about the next part of that story. And so you really have to start to look at business rules that you want to enable when you're starting to generate a lot of data from all of these channels firing. And you have to work with different cultures in the organization, right, to let the field recognize the value of that intel, because you've got a warm lead for them, right? So they have to be receptive to the intel that you're going to feed them. And that goes back to the changing the culture and creating new, new dynamics for taking advantage of what the customer is signaling their interest to be. Good question.
And then I would say there's also a big difference, geographical difference. In the US, Henry is able to do all of these things. In Europe, we have way more limitations because it's very difficult to actually acquire enough third-party data on the physicians. You basically need the physician to be in your own channel to acquire more data. So your own channel being email or your website. But obviously, a lot of campaigns are made on third-party websites, being a banner, being an email being sent by a third party, being hosted content on a media platform, and you don't get named. Information for these type of things, which makes that very often a lot of companies say, "Oh, I'm doing omnichannel. It's amazing. I'm building this story from one channel to the other," but basically they're building between sales, email, and website, which is already good, but it's only a part of an actual, let's say, omnichannel in the sense using a lot of channels strategy. So AI will help as far as you can also legally go. And unfortunately, at least in Europe and in Switzerland, we cannot go half as far as our imagination and the technology is currently allowing us to do.
Yeah, do you think there's a need for change of the rules, I guess?
Well, I think this is a whole other conversation, but
another webinar.
There's a patchwork of privacy regulation in the US. So California's got regulation, Montana's got regulation, Maine. It's getting harder as marketers to kind of, suppress certain states and populations in order to run a macro campaign nationally. It's less than optimal, I will say. But David raises a really good point, which is, what do you have permission to do ultimately within your legal regulatory framework? And irrespective of that, I'll say something bold. I think data about your customer is the competitive advantage. It doesn't matter where you are. The more you understand and have amassed about the customer, the better you're able to serve them and understand them. Now, you may have challenges, a higher hurdle to get the permission to do what you want to do, or maybe you need to change strategy from like a just buy inventory to create a closed environment like an app or register for something because the value is so good inside of what I have for you. Then you open up the horizons to build a really powerful data set. But look at what Amazon has about its customers. Look at what Google has amassed about its customers. The really powerful tech firms have built incredibly large data sets about customer behaviors and the direction that their purchase funnel works. And by doing that, they're creating entirely new offerings. They are personalizing the experience at a scale of hundreds of millions of people. And that is all
content for that, because now we're going to have AI creating contents. But as of today, and that's another question we had a bit earlier about MLR, the MLR is the bottleneck very often. We need to be able to also find a way to prove contents in a quick way, because we're speaking. Let's say that I know everything about my HCP called Henry. I know that he likes webinars. I know that he likes speaking about AI and all that. But then I don't have enough content to push to you to personalize the experience if you come on my website. I have 3 webinars over the last 3 years, and I spoke 2 times about AI. So what am I going to show you, even if I know everything about you? So that's to answer the other question that we from Imran. MLR is, for me, a very hot topic in AI. How can we actually improve this process? And a lot of companies are focusing on that, amongst other ourselves, where basically there is a pre-MLR part where all the, let's say, easy, time-consuming things are being checked, so that people can really do let's say the last revision. So imagine that you have a very smart intern reviewing everything, but he does that all the time, and then you just come and quickly check if he did his or her job correctly. And that's the direction that a lot of MLR tools are using right now. I personally think the biggest savings over the next year will come from MLR.
And that's a really good. So 2 comments on that one. One, David, literally this week, I did an education session for the review team, so legal, regulatory, medical, about AI summaries and emails. So what's happening right now is the engineers at Apple, Google, Yahoo, all the email major providers, they are now doing AI summaries of subject lines in inboxes. And they're doing that to create a better experience, because everybody's got far too much email and no attention span.
Yeah.
And so they are now using your email that you carefully get approval for is being scanned by an AI tool and paraphrased so it can fit succinctly in the email header, pre-header, preview in the inbox. And all of this is because of the new chipsets that are being put on the phones, right? So that'll wash in and everybody will have AI summaries. And so we showed the MLR team, look at all the email assets that we've approved. This is what they actually look like on the phone. So we showed them, you approved this, but it took our subject line and crunched it up and cut it off here. So while we were trying to do fair balance in the subject line, all of a sudden we've got half as many characters, and the operating system is processing that information and cataloging it. If we do not engage with an email, it'll relegate it to an advertising folder and not the primary folder anymore. So these engineers are playing with the assets that we sweat tears over to try and get approval. Those systems are going to be the rate limiting factor about how many opens and clicks we get in the inbox. And that's a domino effect. And we expect people will, we'll have to hunt in some cases for the emails that we think we're so proud of, because it's been relegated to a folder that's kind of like the advertising folder. So that, I think, is a really important piece of pulling your MLR team with you. You've got to drive education. You've got to show them how the landscape is changing, how the assets that we desperately want approved are processed in these digital platforms, and that is outside of our control. And we are not going to be held liable for our language being manipulated by an AI system, but we have to figure out better ways to generate emails that lead to better descriptions, better categorizations. And we're already seeing some of that, play out in how those emails are crafted by other companies. Another good one on a system level one is Google has got a new tool called Notebook. And what Notebook does is it takes publicly available information. So you can upload a document, you can point it to a website, you feed it. And I do a what's going on in digital marketing kind of newsletter for the commercial team once in a while. So I dumped in all the white papers and research and, news announcements into Notebook. And Notebook then gave me a chat interface that I could query. And it could say, what would you like to know? And I focused on social media developments, right? The moderation stuff, and Facebook has changed quite a lot this year. And you can actually have a conversation using the AI with the body of information you fed it to let the audience ask questions and get an interpreted answer from the AI. Then what Notebook does is it lets you make a podcast out of that language model. And so you can create a 10 or 20 minute conversation like Lena and David talking to each other about the information that's in the data set. And it does this in about 5 minutes of processing. And you've got a 20-minute podcast out of what you fed it. I mean, the speed with which these things work now is incredible. And people are just waking up to, the power of that. But we have gone from sort of a handwritten e-newsletter now to like, I dump it in, put a language model. You can ask it some things if you're interested. And here's a podcast. So listen to it on your way to work. That's a step change for how we're teaching the organization, but a really exciting one. And it sounds like people. It sounds like real people. Sorry, David.
there is something that goes very much hand in hand with the notebook LM. Some projects we did with a few customers where we basically feed in all the playbooks they have. So, every company has tons of playbooks, how to do webinar, how to do this, how to do that. There are very nice 100 pages PowerPoints, which usually sit somewhere where nobody knows where they are. Nobody ever looks at them, because when you need them, you don't know where they are. And the idea is you can feed actually all your company information and have simply a chat interface to chat with it. Obviously, people will say, yeah, I can do that with ChatGPT. But when you do it with your own system, you have your own ways, specifying your own tools. For example, I may be using SpotMe, Onomi, I think it's called now. I may be using Onomi right now for my webinars, and that's how you actually create a webinar with Omni, how you promote it, and so on. And linked to that, then you can have your company's own information. For example, I know that Germany did a webinar and they had actually 100 people signing up, but only 20 actually showing up. And that means 20% of show up. I had 30%. Apparently, I'm doing a bit better than Germany, so it's good to know. Or these are my expectations and these are the KPIs. Or maybe in my case, I'm a small country, I'm in Switzerland, so if I have a similar show up and I only have 20 people signing up, then maybe I need to do more advertisement for my webinar or something like that. So instead of having to go and search for the information in 100 different places, you have your chat that actually tells you what are the benchmark in your company, benchmark that have been agreed on, or benchmark from experiences, what are the learnings ideally, and also what are simply the playbooks on how to do that. And instead of searching 20 different people, you just ask this AI, and there is no hallucination because it's your own data training the model.
Now, and so to take David's idea a step further, how many company intranets are cluttered with things that you can't find, and they're like antiquated and need to be updated, the links break all the time. I remember standing up these massive intranets for departments that was like, right? It's a huge housekeeping activity, right? But imagine all that.
There are as many cluttered, useless intranet as there are intranet on the world.
Correct, right? So imagine you're a company, you've got an employee policy, a social media policy, a bereavement leave, you've got, field force policy, you dump all of that into a language model, and your intranet just becomes a, what would you like to ask me kind of interface, right? And it's like, I have, what is the bereavement policy? You ask it and it'll tell you. That changes how we engage as an organization. And it simplifies the frustration factor of trying to find the information that employees will have all the time. There's a demand there for that. That's a really good example. I'll drop in the chat one. It's not from Pharma, but I want to see a pharma company do this. There's a company called Carvana in the US that basically had a purchase funnel that captured a lot of information about users, what kind of vehicle they wanted, where they lived, what age they were, etc. And Carvana took all of that information in the purchase exploration stage of the journey and created a personalized AI video from the car you were going to buy, addressed to the purchaser, to tell them, I'm so excited to go on a road trip with you. I'm a convertible. I live in Montana. And while they're saying that, you've got the skies of the mountains of Montana in the background and a couple of monuments and sightseeing things. Now, so they scaled it to millions, right? But as a consumer experience, the surprise and delight factor is insane. It's really cool to see that after you provide that information, right? There's a payback. Now imagine you're signing up for a patient support program. You have a very high touch, a very difficult journey to manage with this chronic condition. What could we ask patients to say, what's the best way for us to support you? Do you want nurse support? Do you want text messages, sent to you to supply reinforcement and help you with other information? And using all of the attributes we would shape in the introduction of a support program, you could turn that into something like that that says, we're so excited to have this journey with you for health, and let us show you some of the things that you'll be having access to as we go through together, and your treatment strategy is tailored to the needs that you have as a patient. it's going to take courage. These are things that are real. It's not science fiction. It just requires the vision and the commitment to say, like, that would elevate what we offer in the marketplace to the next level, and give our patients the care they deserve.
It's really cool, Henry. I'm thinking, I used to work in a medical device industry, right? And one of the big things, especially with like knee replacement, hip replacement, for a lot of patients, they they really took time to make the decision to actually go ahead with a replacement and delaying it. And I could really imagine how content and videos like this could help people sort of envision and understand, like, from going from a really painful place to going to a place where they can see themselves, moving again and doing things that they might not be able to at the moment due to their condition.
Yeah, and obviously as a marketer, you care about risk benefit, right? You cannot oversell the benefits and make a promise that you can't back up or have equal risk information, right? But what you can say is, what are your goals, right?
Yeah.
I want to be able to lift my grandkids up, and not have back pain, or I would like to see myself do a hike, and so I'm trying to get into physical shape to with the condition that I have, and you can tailor, what happens, because they're willing to share information. Like, I think if one thing social media has done to audiences, it's kind of conditioned a little bit of transparency, and I'll volunteer some of that information for you. But marketers need to meet them where they're at, right? So you've got to have some value to give if you're asking for information. Obviously, this is a fun topic, right? Just a couple of others on the applications of AI, and to go back to data. Data strategy, I think, is a really important part of organizations, and data sets are big enough in the US, at least, to do some pretty advanced segmentation. So I know, for instance, if Lena behaves a certain way and her behavior is quite different from David, my activation strategy is going to be tailored to each of them based on what the data set says about their past behavior. So we use some of those segmentation analysis with data sets to inform the activation piece. There's things like ambient listening devices as well that use AI. So Microsoft's got Copilot. You can have an AI summary of this webinar probably generated and provided. In the physician offices, they're now doing ambient listening, but in the patient-physician appointment, the doctor is burdened by EHR paperwork. So what I think it's Microsoft has done is you turn on the ambient listening device, the doctor interviews the patient, you have the normal exchange, but then Microsoft paraphrases and drops all of the exchanged and important information into the EHR system, taking about 90% of the paperwork off the physician's plate. And docs love that, right? And you've got a couple of other platforms. Insurance is a big thing in the US that, doctors often fight with. So a couple of big physician platforms, communication platforms, they're now helping physicians write AI-generated pre-authorization letters so they can advocate on the patient's behalf to get coverage for the medication. The doctor just needs to enter a few quick things about the reason the patient needs the meds, and the AI will generate the letter the insurer needs to put that into the covered bucket for the patient. So there's a lot going on, guys, and I don't think it's like, there's a little bit of experimentation. It's like whole hog. And I think it's really important to focus on the business problem first. Don't get excited about the shiny platform. Own business problems and use the tools for the business problems. And if you look at it that way, I think you can create a business case to do it.
That's a nice transition into, we have about 10 minutes left, right, of our webinar. So I want to just finish up with a few questions. So that's a nice transition into the biggest challenge you've faced when trying to implement AI into your strategy. Is that piece you just mentioned?
Yes, but I think it goes back to the competing motives, between our companies.
Yeah,
we're here to serve patient. AI companies are entrepreneurs, and they want to scale. Maybe the end game is selling out their algorithm to like a Microsoft or a OpenAI or something like that. And so, can we protect the organization? Can we work with an entrepreneurial company? Are we going to be taken advantage of because we've given a lot of IP in how we would query and use the AI, and they've just made their product better to serve the competition in the broader marketplace, and we haven't been able to protect the IP that we care about in our pipeline. So I think a lot of tools are public right now, right? So everybody is playing with things that are in the back end are helping that algorithm be better. Firewalling and protecting closed language models and having those tools play in a safe environment, ensuring that it's not connected to anyone else that's also licensing is a top priority for us if we're going to do an investment.
What's your take on that, David, in terms of what you've seen with clients? What are the biggest challenges, you faced with them?
I think it's the fact that people think everybody is different, every company is different, and they make no effort to adapt, which means that in the end, a lot of the tools need to be fully customized. And then people wonder, why is it so expensive and does it take so much time? But no company or few companies are open to actually adapt slightly their system or their data or anything to have an off-the-shelf tool that would be much cheaper. They really want to have everything customized from the format of the data which is entered, or they simply have no format. Basically, they just dump in PowerPoints which are different even within the same company, and they wonder why. Why do we take time to actually ingest the data? Why do we take time to have a specific feature? But it's very often because they want it in a very specific, different way from what others are doing. And if you look at most of the tools that we're using, MS Teams is the same for everybody. Outlook is the same for everybody. Even Windows is the same for everybody. There are a few things that can be tweaked here and there, but most of the teams we use are still off the shelves. And for anything new like AI, people think, okay, now I want something that's customized to my need, but I want it at the cost of the off-the-shelf product that I'm used to pay. So that's an issue. And again, it comes back to change management and leadership. Is the leadership ready to do the necessary change to adapt? Is leadership happy to pay more just to have something customized? And customized doesn't mean simply having your own LLM on your own server. I'm really speaking about customizing the whole experience.
On that note, do you think, guys, that companies will have their own, you mentioned their own language model for each company, or do you think there will be over time some more sort of broadness and people will kind of, like you mentioned with Outlook and Microsoft and so forth, people won't feel that they need to customize? Because it's interesting, Henry, you also mentioned points about, proprietary information and all that stuff. What's your take on that?
Well, it's not one language model per company. It's hundreds of language models per company. And a good example is Moderna. Just in the legal department, Moderna uploaded all of the master service agreements for their contracts into a language model. So they've got a boilerplate master service agreement for any vendor. And they can, if you want, if the vendor's like, no, you've got to use our master service agreement, you just upload the vendor's master service agreement, and it does a side by side and says, these clauses compatible, these ones incompatible. We have to discuss this. And the amount of work that, the legal team, would need to do to try and find those needles in the haystack, it just drops. You look at, I think it was the Ozempic team, just yesterday, they posted that, is it Novo? Which is Ozempic? Is it Novo? Novo's got like a big enough clinical data set now that medical summaries are being generated using AI from some of their primary research. And it's pretty darn good, according to what their CMO is saying. So like, the companies are finding applications with the commitment, but it's not one language model. It's going to be a language model for every department's uses. Brand teams are going to upload every single asset and claim and referenceable data point that they've ever made in order to create new assets at some point. And that'll be a commercial application sitting in the brand team. The business development team will go and grab everything that's in the area of interest for acquisitions and build a language model for analysis, and does it fit with our portfolio and stuff like that. So I don't think there's going to be a czar. I think there's going to be people that are masters of the tools sitting within business environments that are really championing the use cases. The one other thing I did want to mention is that AI is not necessarily the starting point for a project. And I'll give you one example that we're doing an animated YouTube video for patients on some education. And this is going to be rolled out across the country. So it's going to go to several different sites. And there's a tool that can take a script, so the manuscript of what the narrator is saying and the visuals of what's inside the video, and I can match the video asset to a database of first name, last name, clinic site, and state, and it will fuse each row of the data set with the video. So I can, in essence, create personalized video at scale. So if Lena's in one part of the country, I can say, hey, Lena, welcome to your patient education video on this. It's good to see that you're in wherever you are, right, in Porto. And David's sitting over in another part of the world, and I can make it about David. And it's processing that's doing that, but the AI is smart enough that it enunciates David's name properly, his village properly, and all of that is just raw processing. And we introduced it after the project had started to say, you know what, we can make this better with a little bit of help from AI. And
that's very cool.
That. Okay.
David, a few comments on the question, and then the last few minutes, I have one more question. You will get 1 minute per person to answer.
No, actually, I just do +1 on what Henry said. There's going to be a lot of solutions within each of the companies. What will be interesting is to see how to commoditize that, how to make the fact that the legal team has their own LLM a small project that can be almost done off the shelf. It's always going to be difficult with data privacy, so it's maybe not going to be 100% off the shelf, but the commoditization of these things will be interesting. But in any case, as Henry said, it's going to be tons of different LLMs and other solutions within each of the companies.
Great. So with no further ado, the final question. You get 45 seconds. If not, we'll lose time. What's that one trend, AI trend in pharma marketing that we should all pay attention to this year, that we should go away from this webinar and not forget to pay attention to? Henry, you go first.
No, I'm going to lob that to David.
Okay, David, you go first, and then Henry can get a thinker.
It's one point we discussed earlier, and that Imran in the chat mentioned. I think it's MLR. Yeah. Because MLR is, when we think about the business reason to do something and the savings you can do, MLR is a low-hanging fruit. We spend a lot of time, money on it. Improving that will really improve the processes. Perfect. Henry, your turn.
Yeah, and I think, at least in marketing, right? So as a commercial team, I think the content creation abilities of AI at scale, infusing that sort of getting started bolus or generation with the human touch of your agency, let's cherry pick that idea and make it something bigger. I think we'll see more of that as AI assisted content and personalization for audiences, and that's the front facing stuff. I think there's going to be tons of back end business rules and data sets that here in the US we'll probably geek out on a lot, but I do think content creation is just so powerful. Brands have to be taking advantage of it. Otherwise, you're losing an edge.
So great. That's a wrap. And on that note, actually, guys, once we finish the webinar, we'll send you to a thank you page. And there's actually a free white paper about content modelization for you guys. So make sure to take a look. And we aim to make these webinars once a month. So stay tuned, follow us on LinkedIn and whatnot, and join us again if you like. Hopefully it was valuable. David, Henry, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a real pleasure, and thank you for all the insights.
Happy marketing, guys. Good to see you. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Take care.